Some incredible breaking news that
Señor, con sus brazos levantando hacia el cielo.
So
the photographs came before any explanation. A group of tourists standing near the western shoreline of the Dead Sea, watching the light fade over the mountains of Moab, turned their cameras toward the sky and captured something that none of them could explain. Above the water, in the space between the surface and the clouds, a luminous figure appeared to be standing. It was not moving. It did not flash or scatter like ordinary light. It held its form softly illuminated, outlined against the darkening horizon, and those who looked at the images described the shape the same way, again and again, without coordinating their accounts. A woman, veiled, arms extended slightly downward, as if reaching toward the water below. The photographs spread in hours. By the next morning, they had reached nearly every continent. Some viewers immediately recognized the posture, the inclination of the head, the extended hands, the stillness of the figure, all reminded them of traditional depictions of the Virgin Mary, particularly the image associated with the miraculous medal, where she stands with rays of light descending from her open hands toward the earth. Others were more cautious. They noted the distance, the quality of the light, the way moisture and refracted color above open water can create shapes that the human mind instinctively turns into familiar forms. Atmospheric optics can produce halos, arcs, and pillars of light that appear more structured than they are. This should be considered carefully because not every strange image in the sky is a supernatural event. But what disturbed serious observers was not the shape alone, it was the location. The Dead Sea is not ordinary water. It sits at the lowest point on the surface of the earth, nearly 430 meters below sea level, in a valley where the land has been sinking for thousands of years. Its waters are so saturated with salt, nearly 10 times more concentrated than the ocean, that almost nothing living can survive within them. Ancient peoples understood what this place represented. It appeared in Scripture not as a neutral backdrop, but as a symbol of desolation, stillness, and the weight of divine judgment. Ezekiel 47 describes a prophetic vision in which a river flowing from a future temple eventually reaches the Dead Sea and heals it, turning its lifeless waters into a place where fish swim and trees line the banks bearing fruit every month, their leaves meant for healing. That prophecy has never been literally fulfilled. The Dead Sea remains what it has always been, and yet in recent years, something has been quietly changing along its edges. Small freshwater springs have been forming near the western shore. In several places, sinkholes opened unexpectedly and revealed clear pools of moving water beneath the salt crust. Researchers documented living fish in some of these pools, small and fragile but alive, in a place historically defined by the absence of life. Whether these changes represent the beginning of what Ezekiel described, or simply the natural movement of underground aquifers responding to geological pressure, no one can say with certainty. But the timing presses the question, because into this landscape of slow, quiet change, an image of a figure appeared above the water. And for many who believe, the image and the moment cannot be entirely separated. Apparitions of the Virgin Mary have been reported throughout Christian history. The Catholic Church has formally recognized a small number after lengthy investigation. Lourdes, Fatima, Guadalupe, Medjugorje. What those recognized apparitions share is not only the visual experience but the message that accompanied them. Each one carried a specific call: a return to prayer, repentance, the rosary, consecration. They were not events meant to satisfy curiosity. They were moments of urgency. Whether or not what appeared above the Dead Sea belongs to that category, the image has caused millions of people to stop and ask the same question: why here and why now? It is worth thinking seriously about the location, because it is not incidental. The Dead Sea sits at the intersection of the Jordan Valley and the region the Bible identifies with the destruction of Sodom and Gomorrah. Genesis 19 describes that judgment arriving suddenly, fire and sulfur falling from the sky, the cities and surrounding plain consumed, and Lot's wife looking back and becoming a pillar of salt. The region became associated ever after with what happens when humanity turns away from God and refuses to listen. That weight has rested over this landscape for thousands of years. Now a figure described as luminous, quiet, reaching downward appears above those same waters. If the location is part of the message, then the contrast is not accidental. Mercy appearing above a place defined by judgment, arms extended not in condemnation but in invitation. That is the image the photographs carry. And even those who are skeptical of the supernatural interpretation have acknowledged that there is something striking about a glowing human shape appearing above the most lifeless body of water on Earth during a period when that water is showing, for the first time in documented history, signs of change. Marian apparitions, whether fully accepted or still under discernment, have consistently brought one message to the people who witness them: pray. Return to God. Do not wait. The apparition at Fatima in 1917 carried explicit warnings about the direction of the world and the need for consecration and repentance. The apparition at Lourdes brought healing through water drawn from a spring that appeared only after the visions. At Guadalupe, the image left on the tilma of Juan Diego bore a figure whose eyes, when examined under modern microscopic analysis, reflected a scene researchers have found difficult to explain naturally. These events divide people. Those who believe point to the fruits they have produced, millions brought closer to prayer and faith. Those who remain skeptical point to the difficulty of verification, the distance between emotion and evidence, and the long history of images being misread and misapplied. Both positions should be held with honesty. The Church itself counsels caution. Not every vision is divine. Not every light in the sky is a messenger. But the heart of a believer is also called not to mock what may be sacred. 1 Thessalonians 5:21 says, "Test everything and hold fast to what is good." That verse is not a call to reject mystery. It is a call to approach mystery with wisdom rather than with either instant acceptance or reflexive dismissal. So when an image appears above the Dead Sea, the wise response is not to demand immediate certainty. The wise response is to ask what the moment is pointing toward. And what it points toward is not complicated. Whether the figure above the water is a supernatural visitation or a rare convergence of light and atmosphere, the question it raises is the same. What does this place need? What does any place defined by lifelessness need? It needs what Ezekiel saw in his vision: a river that heals, a source of life moving into the most desolate places and making them living. The spiritual meaning of that vision is not restricted to the geography of Israel. It speaks to the human interior. There are places within the human heart, as dry and salt-saturated as the Dead Sea. Places where bitterness has accumulated for so long that nothing grows anymore. Places where grief, resentment, pride, or distance from God have made the inner landscape feel impossible to restore. The vision of Ezekiel says something directly to those places. The river does not stop before the desolate waters, and it enters them, it changes them, and wherever it flows, life follows. That is what the image above the Dead Sea invites people to consider. Not panic, not obsession with the photograph itself, not the endless debate about whether the shape is real. The invitation is deeper. Come to the source of living water, return to prayer. Let what is lifeless inside you be brought back. In Luke 1:38, Mary said to the angel, Behold the handmaid of the Lord. Be it unto me according to thy word. That phrase has echoed for 2,000 years because it represents the posture the image above the Dead Sea seems to reflect. Not authority, not command, surrender, availability. An open hand extended downward, not to take, but to give. If the apparition is real, she comes as she has always come, in every recognized vision, not to draw attention to herself, but to point toward her son. At Cana, she said to the servant, Simply do whatever he tells you. Every Marian apparition that has carried the church's trust has pointed in the same direction, away from the messenger and toward the one who sends her. And if the apparition is a trick of the light, the question it raises still belongs to everyone who sees the image. What would you do if mercy appeared above the most lifeless place you know? Now, before we continue, if this is reaching your heart, take a moment to like this video, leave a comment below, and subscribe so you do not miss what comes next. Because what we are about to look at goes deeper still. The people who stood on the shoreline of the Dead Sea and looked up did not expect what they saw. Most of them came simply to float on the famous salt water, to take photographs of a landscape that appears almost lunar in its strangeness, to mark another destination on a journey through the Holy Land. They did not come looking for signs, and perhaps that is significant in itself. Throughout Scripture, the moments that changed people most were not always the ones they prepared for. Moses was not looking for a burning bush, he was looking after sheep. Gideon was not waiting for an angel, he was hiding grain from an enemy. Mary of Magdala was not expecting the resurrection. She went to the tomb expecting to anoint a body. The pattern repeats across centuries. The sacred tends to arrive where ordinary life is already happening. Not on stages prepared for it, but on ordinary hillsides and quiet places, beside water that no one thought was significant until the moment it became unforgettable. That pattern does not prove what appeared above the Dead Sea was supernatural. But it does suggest that dismissing an experience simply because it happened to ordinary people on an ordinary afternoon is not wisdom either. The tourists who took those photographs were not prophets. They were not pilgrims on a fast. They were visitors with cameras. And what entered the frame of those cameras has not left the minds of those who have seen the images since. Something about the figure above the water does not release its hold. And that persistence is worth examining, not to feed obsession, but to understand what the soul recognizes that the analytical mind is still trying to categorize. There is a long tradition within both Eastern and Western Christianity of what theologians call sensus fidei, the sense of the faithful, a kind of spiritual intuition that runs beneath reasoned argument. It is not infallible. It can be misled by emotion, by cultural expectation, by the desire to find meaning in coincidence, but it is also not nothing. The community of believers across centuries has sometimes recognized truth before the institutions that governed them did. The disciples recognized the risen Christ at the breaking of bread before the full theological framework of the resurrection had been articulated. That recognition was not irrational. It was a kind of knowing that preceded, but did not contradict the reasoning that followed. When millions of people look at a photograph and feel the same thing, when the same word rises spontaneously from hearts across different languages and traditions, that convergence is worth pausing over. The word that has risen around these photographs is not fear. It is not dread. It is not the word people reach for when they see something threatening. The word that keeps appearing in comments and letters, in messages sent between strangers who have never met, is the same word in every language: mother. That response deserves attention because the theological tradition that surrounds Marian apparitions has always understood her role in exactly those terms. Not as a deity, not as a power independent of God, but as the one who stands at the intersection of heaven and human vulnerability, the one who appeared at the foot of the cross when most others had fled, the one to whom the dying Christ entrusted the beloved disciple, and through him, all those who would believe. John 19:27 says, "And from that hour the disciple took her to his own home." That moment at the cross is not incidental. It is the biblical foundation for understanding every apparition that has followed. She does not appear to draw worship to herself. She appears because she was given to stand beside the suffering, the lost, the far from God, and to say the same thing. She said to the servants at Cana, "Do whatever he tells you." If the figure above the Dead Sea is delivering that message, then the location intensifies it beyond anything that could be said in words alone. Because the Dead Sea is not just a body of water. It is, in the imagination of the biblical world, the end point of what happens when humanity chooses wrongly and refuses correction. The cities that stood along its ancient shores were known for a degree of corruption that Genesis does not recount with pleasure but records with grief. They were not destroyed without warning. Abraham had prayed for them. Angels had been sent. Lot had been placed within the city, perhaps as a last opportunity for the people to turn. They did not turn. And the consequence was total. The land itself bears the mark of that event to this day. Salt, desolation. Nothing growing where once there were farms and cities. Now above that same water, above the lowest, most lifeless, most judgment-saturated landscape on earth, a figure of light and mercy appears. And she is not pointing down in condemnation. She is reaching down in invitation. If that contrast is deliberate, if the location is part of the message, then the message is one of the most powerful that could be delivered. It is this, even here, even in the place that has come to represent the furthest distance from God, the deepest consequence of turning away, the most absolute desolation the land can produce. Even here, mercy comes. Even here, the invitation is extended. Even here, something can change. That is the message of Ezekiel's river. And it is the message that every genuine Marian apparition has carried. Come back. There is still time. The door is not closed. In this light, the Dead Sea stops being only a body of water and becomes an image of the human condition. Every person carries within them a region that feels like it has passed beyond the possibility of healing, a relationship that ended in complete destruction, a moral failure that left the inner landscape salted and sterile, a wound so old that nothing has grown from it in decades, a distance from God so long established that the person can no longer feel the direction home. The Dead Sea says, "This is what total desolation looks like." The figure above it says, "And I have come here specifically, not to the places that are already flourishing, not to the temples and sanctuaries where prayer is already rising, but here, to the lowest point on earth, to the place where life has been impossible, because that is where the river in Ezekiel's vision goes, not to waters that are already healthy, to the waters that cannot sustain life on their own. And wherever the river flows," Ezekiel writes, "everything will live, everything, not some things, not the parts that are still a little salvageable, everything. The fish will be very numerous. The trees along the bank will bear fresh fruit every month. Their leaves will not wither, and their fruit will not fail. Because the water for them flows from the sanctuary, from the presence of God Himself." Now pause for a moment. If what appeared above the Dead Sea carries even a fraction of that message, then the correct response is not to spend the next week debating the photograph. The correct response is to identify the Dead Sea within yourself, the place that feels past healing, the thing you have stopped asking God about because you have begun to believe it is simply beyond the river's reach. Bring it back into prayer. Not because the photograph proves anything, but because Ezekiel's vision is already in your Bible and has been waiting for you to take it seriously for longer than you may realize. That vision was written for the person who has looked at their own interior landscape and concluded that nothing will ever grow there. It was written for the family that has been broken for so long that restoration feels like a fantasy. It was written for the community that has lost its faith, the church that has grown cold, the generation that has walked so far from God that the road home seems too long to travel. To all of those places and all of those people, the vision sends one clear word. The river is coming, and wherever it comes, everything lives. Shortly after the photographs began circulating online, something unexpected happened near the same section of the Dead Sea shoreline. 2 days after the initial sighting, a small group of pilgrims from different countries who had separately been drawn to the location by the news of the apparition arrived at the shore and decided to pray together. They did not know each other. They had come from Poland, from Mexico, from the Philippines, and from Ethiopia. They spoke different languages, they prayed in different forms. But they gathered at the water's edge as the sun dropped toward the western hills, and they stayed there until darkness fell. What they reported afterward was not another visual phenomenon. There was no second apparition, no light formation, no figure in the sky. What they reported was simpler, and in some ways more difficult to explain. They said the silence at the edge of that water was unlike any silence they had ever experienced. Not empty silence, not the silence of abandonment. Something that felt, as one of the pilgrims later described it, inhabited. As though the air itself was attentive, as though they were not the only ones present at the water. That description is not evidence of anything verifiable. Silence cannot be measured. Atmosphere cannot be photographed. But it belongs to the broader pattern of what genuine sacred encounters tend to produce, not spectacle. Not the kind of thing that translates easily into a documentary or a headline. A quality of presence that those inside it recognize as real and those outside it cannot fully access through a secondhand account. What is notable is what those pilgrims did afterward. They did not scatter to write books about what they had experienced. They did not start movements or claim personal authority on the basis of the evening. They went home, to Warsaw, to Mexico City, to Manila, to Addis Ababa, and the pilgrim from Poland began visiting a woman in her parish who had not left her apartment in 3 years because of depression. The pilgrim from Mexico returned to a conversation with his adult son that had broken down years earlier and started it again without anger. The pilgrim from the Philippines went back to her work in a hospital ward where she had been burning out for months and found to her own surprise that something had shifted in the quality of her attention. The pilgrim from Ethiopia began each morning for the following weeks with a prayer she had not prayed since childhood, a prayer she had stopped after a grief so large she could not find words for it. These things are not miracles in the canonical sense. No one was raised from the dead, no disease was cured in an instant, no water turned to wine. But they are the kind of fruit the tradition has always looked for when evaluating whether an encounter with the sacred was genuine. Not the spectacular, but the transformed. Not the experience itself, but what the experience produced in the ordinary texture of a life lived afterward. Luke 6:44 says, "Each tree is known by its own fruit." That verse was not written about apparitions, but it has been applied to them for centuries, and rightly so. The question that matters is not ultimately whether the photograph is conclusive. The question is what people carry away from the encounter. If what appeared above the Dead Sea sends people back into their daily lives more willing to forgive, more committed to prayer, more attentive to the person beside them who is quietly suffering, then the fruit is good regardless of the ongoing debate about what produced it. And if it produces instead only argument, division, pride in those who believe, and contempt in those who do not, then even a genuine apparition would be being used badly. The apparition is never the point. The direction it points is always the point, and the direction is always the same. Return. Pray. Love more carefully. Do not wait until you are certain of everything before you begin to live as though God is real. But the events around the Dead Sea did not end with the pilgrims on the shore. In the weeks following the first photographs, a pattern began to emerge among people who had seen the images and found themselves unexpectedly moved by them. Priests began reporting increases in confessions, not dramatic surges, but a steady return of people who had been away from the sacrament for years, sometimes decades. One confessor in a city in the northeastern United States described a Wednesday afternoon in which 4 people arrived without appointment and without apparent connection to each other, each saying some version of the same thing. They had seen the photograph. They were not sure what to make of it, but something in it had made them feel that they had been away long enough. That kind of spiritual movement is difficult to quantify and impossible to verify through the methods of journalism or science. But it belongs to the category of events that the tradition of discernment takes seriously, because the test of an apparition has never been only about the visual event itself. It has always been about the conversion it produces. The spring at Lourdes did not prove the apparitions to Bernadette by its existence alone. It proved them by the healings it mediated over more than a century and a half, healings examined by a medical committee that operates to this day. The tilma of Guadalupe did not prove the apparitions to Juan Diego by its survival alone. It proved them by the millions of indigenous people who came to faith in a territory that had resisted evangelization for years, who recognized in the image of the woman clothed with the sun something that spoke directly to their own symbols and their own longing. In both cases, the proof was not primarily visual or scientific. It was transformative. Something changed in people and in communities and in the landscape of human lives in ways that pointed beyond the event to its source. It is too early to say whether what appeared above the Dead Sea belongs in that category. The tradition of discernment requires time, investigation, and the kind of patient humility that our era of immediate information does not make easy. But it is not too early to pay attention to what is already moving in people who have seen the photographs. It is not too early to note that the response has not been primarily one of fear or hysteria or the kind of obsessive calculation that sometimes accompanies claims of the supernatural. The dominant response has been quieter, more interior. People have gone to church who had not been in years. People have picked up rosaries they had set down. People have called family members they had been estranged from. People have sat in silence and prayed prayers that did not come easily and felt that something on the other side of the silence was listening. Those responses are not evidence in the scientific sense, but they are evidence in the sense that the tradition has always found most compelling. Something is moving. Something that does not look like what fear produces or what mass hysteria produces or what clever marketing produces. Something quieter than any of those things and in some ways more durable. And it is moving in the direction the genuine apparitions have always pointed, toward God, toward the sacraments, toward each other, toward the interior life that the noise of the modern world has been slowly drowning for decades. That direction is worth following regardless of what the final assessment of the photographs turns out to be, because the destination to which the image seems to be pointing is the same destination the Church has been inviting people toward for 2,000 years. And if a strange light above a salt sea can prompt a person to take one more step in that direction, then the light has served a purpose far greater than any controversy about its origin. The Dead Sea is changing. That is not in dispute. The rate of water loss is measurable and has been measured for decades. The sinkholes along the western shore are real and growing. The freshwater springs are real and have been documented by geologists and hydrologists who do not have theological agendas. Something is happening beneath the surface of that ancient sea that the instruments of science are recording without fully understanding. Some researchers suggest that the fresh water entering the basin from below is connected to the same aquifer system that feeds the Jordan River, which itself has been declining for years due to climate change, human extraction, and the diversion of water by the nations through which it flows. Others propose that deep geological fissures along the Dead Sea transform. The fault system that runs beneath the valley are allowing water to migrate in patterns that have not been studied before because they have not been observed before. What is clear is that the landscape is in motion. What was stable for centuries is shifting. What was sealed is opening. What was underground is surfacing. That description applies to the geology of the Dead Sea. But it also describes with uncanny precision what seems to be happening spiritually in the people who have encountered the photographs from above its waters. What was sealed is opening. What was underground is surfacing. The grief that a person carried alone for 20 years and never spoke aloud suddenly needs to be spoken. The prayer that went silent after a loss so large it seemed to invalidate. Prayer suddenly returns, uncertain and trembling, but present. The faith that was buried under a decade of practical materialism, and the daily insistence that there was no time for anything beyond survival suddenly pushes through the surface like the freshwater springs pushing through the salt crust of the Dead Sea floor. These are not small things. These are the things the spiritual tradition has always understood as the true content of revival. Not the large public event with the famous speaker and the crowd. Not the viral moment that generates traffic and then fades. The thing that happens quietly in individual hearts when something reaches through the ordinary surface of life and touches what is real beneath it. That is what the springs in the Dead Sea floor represent. Not the dramatic parting of waters, not the spectacular miracle that silences every objector. A small, persistent, living flow entering the most resistant place on earth and beginning grain by grain and drop by drop to change it. Isaiah 43:19 says, "Behold, I will do a new thing. Now it shall spring forth. Shall ye not know it? I will even make a way in the wilderness and rivers in the desert." That verse was spoken to a people in exile, a people who had been carried away from everything they knew, and were sitting beside rivers they did not recognize, wondering whether God had forgotten them or whether the story was simply over. And into that specific condition, into that specific despair, God said not that he would restore the old thing. He said he would do a new thing, something that had not been seen before, something that would spring forth from places that did not look capable of producing it. The wilderness and the desert are not absence of divine activity. They are, in the language of that prophecy, the precise location where the new thing begins. The Dead Sea in its geological reality and in its symbolic weight is wilderness. It is desert. It is the place that has been resistant to life for longer than any living person can remember, and it is precisely there, into that specific resistance, that the image appeared. Not over a garden, not over a thriving city, not over a place already full of pilgrims and flowers and the evidence of God's blessing. Over the lowest, saltiest, most barren stretch of water on the planet. That choice of location, if it is a choice, if the figure that appeared was sent rather than formed by atmosphere alone, speaks with tremendous precision. It says exactly what the prophet said and what the gospel says and what every genuine apparition has said. The new thing begins in the place you had given up on. The river reaches the waters you thought were beyond healing, and when it gets there, everything lives. Everything. Take a moment now to like this video, share it with someone who needs this message today, and subscribe if you want to continue following what these signs may be revealing. Because there is more to consider. Among the voices that have spoken carefully about the photographs is a theologian who has spent 30 years studying the history of Marian apparitions. She asked to remain unnamed pending the church's formal review of the event, but she made one observation that is worth considering at length. She said that the recognized apparitions in the tradition share a quality that is almost paradoxical. They are always intensely local and simultaneously universal. At Guadalupe, the image spoke directly to the indigenous people of Mexico through symbols that belonged to their specific culture, the stars, the posture, the color of the mantle. But the message it carried was not local. It was the gospel itself, available to everyone. At Fatima, 3 shepherd children in an impoverished village received visions and messages that included geopolitical warnings about events that would unfold across an entire century. The particularity was extraordinary. 3 children, 1 village, a specific field, a specific date, and the universality was equally extraordinary. What was said there is still being read and studied and prayed over 100 years later in every country on earth. She said the photographs from the Dead Sea have that same paradoxical quality. They happened in a specific place at a specific hour to specific people. And they have touched something universal. The Dead Sea is known everywhere. Not everyone has been there, but everyone has heard of it. Its name carries a meaning that needs no translation. Dead. And what appears above the Dead Sea carries an equally universal meaning. Life offered to what was dead. Mercy extended to what was condemned. The mother arriving at the place the father judged, not to reverse the judgment, but to open a door within it. That theological precision, she said, is not something that atmospheric optics can produce. Atmosphere does not choose the Dead Sea, and it does not choose the posture of a woman with extended hands at the precise moment when freshwater springs are appearing beneath the most saline water on earth. It does not choose to appear above a place whose healing was prophesied in Ezekiel at a moment when that prophecy is beginning to find its first physical echoes in the geology of the valley. If this is coincidence, she said, it is the most theologically literate coincidence in the history of atmospheric optics. She was not claiming certainty. She was making an observation about the precision of the convergence, and precision matters in discernment. Because while individual elements of an unusual event can almost always be explained by natural causes, the convergence of multiple precise elements pointing coherently in the same direction is harder to account for without acknowledging that something purposeful may be at work. The springs, the photograph, the location, the posture, the timing, the fruit already visible in the people who encountered the image. Each element separately might be explainable. Together they form a pattern that is more than the sum of its parts. And patterns are how meaning is communicated, not through isolated data points, but through the coherent arrangement of multiple elements into something that makes sense when read as a whole. The scriptures themselves communicate that way, not through single verses extracted from context, but through the whole sweep of a narrative that runs from Genesis to Revelation, and in which specific details only become clear when read against the entire background. The Dead Sea appears at multiple points in that narrative. It is the end point of the Jordan. It sits in the valley where Sodom and Gomorrah stood. It is the geography of exile and judgment, and it is the precise location to which Ezekiel's healing river flows in the last of the great prophetic visions of restoration. If you place an image of a woman with extended hands above that specific body of water at this specific moment in history, and then watch what happens in the people who encounter the image, you are reading a pattern. The pattern says one thing with remarkable consistency: the healing has been announced, the river is moving, the lowest place on earth is the destination. Come. What should a person actually do with this? Not with the theology of it, not with the debate about whether the photographs are genuine, but with the lived experience of encountering something that feels like it is speaking directly to the part of them that is most in need of what the Dead Sea needs. The tradition has always answered that question with the same practical direction. Begin where you are. Begin with what you have. Begin now. Do not wait until you are certain. Do not wait until you have resolved every question about the authenticity of the event. Do not wait until you feel worthy or ready or spiritually mature enough to approach God with whatever it is you have been carrying. The woman at Cana did not have a theology of the incarnation when she said to the servants, "Do whatever he tells you." She had a practical problem and a trust that the person beside her could address it. That trust was enough. The man born blind did not have a Christology when he put mud on his eyes and went to wash in the pool of Siloam. He had an instruction and the willingness to follow it. That willingness was enough. The disciples on the road to Emmaus did not recognize who was walking with them. They knew only that their hearts were burning within them as he spoke. They invited a stranger to stay for dinner. That invitation was enough. The pattern is consistent across the whole of the gospel. God does not require resolution of every question before he acts. He requires only the open hand, the willingness to receive, the small step taken in the direction of trust, even when certainty is still some distance away. So the practical direction is simple. If something in the photographs from the Dead Sea has moved you, follow the movement. Go to prayer. Go to a church. Go to a person you have been avoiding because the conversation will be hard. Go to the place in your own interior landscape that you have been circling around for years without entering because you are afraid of what you will find there. Go there now. Bring what you find to God. Not with polished language, not with the vocabulary of formal prayer, if that does not come naturally to you. With whatever words are actually available, with whatever honesty is possible, with the same directness with which a person who has been away for a long time comes back to someone they love and says, "I have been away too long and I am back and I do not know exactly what comes next, but I am here." That is enough. It has always been enough. Luke 15 describes what happens when the son who has been away returns. The father sees him while he is still a long way off. The father runs to him, and the father does not wait for the formal apology to be completed. He interrupts it with an embrace. He calls for a feast before the son has had the chance to finish the speech he rehearsed on the road home. That is the theology of the image above the Dead Sea. Not a God who watches from a distance while humanity decides whether to return. A God who is already running in the direction of the one who has turned toward home. A figure with arms extended, not in judgment but in welcome. Arms that have been extended above the most desolate water on earth, saying, "I have come here to this place, to the lowest point, to the saltiest ground, to the place you thought was past the reach of anything living. I have come here." And the invitation is still open. The light above the Dead Sea has not dimmed in the minds of those who saw it. The photographs are still circulating. The debate continues. The theologians are still deliberating. The scientists have not arrived at a final explanation. But in the silence between all of that, something simpler and more durable is happening. People are praying. People who had stopped are praying again. People who never prayed are beginning. People are returning to relationships they had abandoned. People are returning to churches they had left. People are returning to themselves, to the interior life that had been buried under years of noise and movement and the relentless pressure of the world. The Dead Sea is changing beneath the surface. And so are the people who have looked at a photograph of a figure above it and felt, against all their prior conclusions, that something in that image was reaching toward them. Let that reaching be received. Let the river come. Let what was dead begin to live. Psalm 42:1 says, "As the deer pants for streams of water, so my soul pants for you, my God." That verse was written by someone who knew what thirst felt like. Not physical thirst. The thirst of a soul that has been in a dry place too long and has not forgotten that water exists even when it cannot find it. The Dead Sea and the figure above it have reminded millions of people that the soul's thirst is real, that the dryness they have been living with is not their natural condition, that somewhere a river is moving toward them from a sanctuary they are invited to enter. The doors open, the arms are extended. The invitation is personal, specific, and directed at the exact place within you that is most in need of what only the living water can provide. Come to the water, even now, even here, especially here. And wherever the river goes, everything will live.